We welcome everyone in different time zones from around the world. We have speakers from India, from Switzerland, and from Brazil with us today. I'll introduce them in a moment. Myself and Professor Kashyap Kompella are the lucky coordinators of this particular panel of many. We want to first thank all the people at FACAMP, the Faculdades de Campinas in Brazil, for their tutelage, for their coordination, and their endless patience with all the technical glitches that happen inevitably. Want to welcome my International Business Transactions class from California Western School of Law here in San Diego. And thank you also, Daniel Silva, and to all the FACAMP team for joining us. Thanks for turning on your cameras, folks. Professor Kompella, any words before we introduce the panel?
No, really looking forward to this thing. I think this is the fourth edition of this conference, and it is going from strength to strength with each edition. So thank you for that. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And for the record, it's 11 o'clock at night for Professor Kompella in Bangalore. And did you say 7:30, Dr. Christian Kunz in Zurich? And Julian Maranhão, it's only 2:30 in the afternoon for you, so you're in good shape. So keep those strong caffeinated drinks coming, Professor Kompella. So welcome everybody, and thank you again to our coordinators. And we are going to be talking about comparative AI, not Amnesty International, although I hope we get to talk about human rights. But the AI in this case is artificial intelligence, and we've got just a star-studded panel with us. Dr. Christian Kunz is here from Zurich. He co-heads Baer and Carr's data protection and digital economy practice, as well as the technology, media, and telecommunications practice groups at the firm. Oh, I think Daniel, I think your mic's on, or somebody's mic is on. Dr. Kunz advises Swiss and international clients on data protection, cybersecurity, and technology law matters, including cybercrime, the development of implementation of data strategies and data protection related processes, monetization of data, which we're going to talk about when we get to data localization and tech nationalism, outsourcing, data transfers, data disclosure, and he today is going to be the font of information of all things EU AI Act. I know I just gave you a bunch of acronyms, but the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act, or as we like to call it, the regulation, which just keeps on giving. If you thought the GDPR was good, just wait for the EU AI Act, as we'll learn going forward. So thank you, Christian, for joining us, and great to see you. My coordinator for this panel is Professor Kashyap Kompella, who's also a co-author of the last couple of books that I've been lucky enough to co-author with him on AI for West Academic Publishing. He's an award-winning industry analyst, a best-selling author, an AI advisor to leading organizations, venture capital funds, and startups in the U.S., in Europe, and in the Asia-Pacific region. In 2021, Thinkers 360 named Professor Kompella as the #1 thought leader on AI globally. He advises enterprises and public sector agencies. He's all over the web with podcasts and blogs, and highly sought after for his very succinct and witty quotations and citations when journalists are out there. He's a visiting professor for AI at the BITS School of Management and at the Institute of Directors. He has a bachelor's degree in electrical and electronics engineering, an MBA in finance, a master of business laws, a postgraduate diploma in intellectual property law, and he is also a CFA holder and for humanity certified auditor. Welcome, Professor Kompella. Thank you for joining us so late in the evening for you on Wednesday. And then finally, Professor Juliano Maranhão is an associate professor at the Law School of the University of São Paulo. He's a founding partner of Maranhão and Menezes, the law firm in São Paulo, and co-founder of the Logarithm Research Association, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to research in artificial intelligence and law. along with professors from other faculties at the Universidade de Sao Paulo. He's the founder and director of Legal Grounds Institute, which focuses on projects related to law and innovation. He earned his doctoral degree from the University of Sao Paulo and a postgraduate degree in the Faculty of Computer Science at Ulrich University, and he's been a visiting professor at Goethe University in Frankfurt. He's also visiting research at the University of Miami, in Leipzig, and in Maastricht. And he also does a lot of work at the European University Institute. So most relevant to what we're talking about today, he was a member of the Brazilian Senate's Juris Committee tasked with drafting the AI Regulatory Framework 2022 and currently serves on the National Council of Justice Committee for revising the regulations governing AI use in the courts, both in 2023 and 2024, and he's been a member of the National Council of Justice Committee on the Use of Personal Data in the Extrajudicial Sector. Welcome, Professor Maranhão. Thank you for joining us. Very excited to have you here. So we're going to start with an opening round. This is going to be really, really fast. Oh, I should mention I'm Professor James Cooper. I'm Canadian, which explains my overwhelming sense of knowing better. And I spell color with a U. Left-handed, and I play drums, and I've been writing some books on AI. All right, moving along. First, lightning round, just to get everybody really excited, because not everybody's had as much coffee as I have this morning, clearly. We'll start with you, Professor Kompella. AI regulation, is it a good thing, a bad thing, going to chill innovation, or going to protect all the citizens and consumers out there? What say you, 50 words or less?
So, yeah, I mean, like all good things, it depends. So we have an opportunity for smart regulation, which balances multiple competing priorities, be it innovation, be it strengthening industrial policy, be it protecting consumer and citizen rights, because AI is a horizontal technology with the dual use, multiple, both the good guys and the bad guys can use AI, etc. But one of the key stumbling blocks to strike this balance is the lack of institutional capability. Lack of institutional capability, both from crafting legislation as well as enforcing legislation.
Thank you for that. Dr. Kunz, AI, and you're doing this from both a Swiss perspective and an EU perspective, and clearly from the law firm perspective. AI regulation, good, bad, or indifferent? What's your sense?
Thanks a lot, James, and again, thanks a lot for having me for this great conversation, which we'll have now. Look, I come from Switzerland, so Switzerland, super flexible, innovation-first approach, no regulation at all to date, versus EU, a lot of regulation. You said it, the Act, right? The EU AI Act, the most comprehensive act we have seen, which impacts businesses not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe. Everyone who wants to place EU systems outputs in the EU market needs to comply. So I'm really coming from Switzerland, loving like this flexibility, not having stringent regulations tied to everything. My sense is currently the innovation-first approach, which Switzerland takes, is the better one than the EU, let's say, security-first citizen protection approach. Remains to be seen 5 years from now, I would say, to be seen how our citizens protected. Then our business still making innovation, placing innovation on the market, or is the EU AI Act, the act, really hindering everything?
All right, so we'll put a pin in that because we definitely will come back and figure that out, and then also try to name 3 top EU-based AI companies that aren't funded by Emmanuel Macron and his cronies. Okay, Juliana Maranhão, Professor Maranhão, from your perspective in a kind of lightning round, succinct, and having written the draft law or co-written the draft law in Brazil that's winding its way through the Congress there, is AI regulation a good thing, a bad thing, or something that we need to kind of balance?
Actually, in Brazil, actually regulation sometimes has been an important element to stimulate investment with the support by the state. So there are 2 components of the Brazilian regulation. The one is the governance obligations for risk mitigation that are related to to fundamental rights protection. But there is also another chapter and another element of the regulation that regards investments and how can the state cooperate with private sector, or how can some bureaucracies be relaxed so that we have more investment and technological development in the field of AI in Brazil. So it's really important to have some I believe there are three elements that are important to ensure here in Brazil for the field of AI. One of them is tools for investment in the technology for this market to be developed in Brazil. The other one is risk mitigation, which is important at any place, regardless of the particularities of the country. And the third one is the problem of legal certainty in Brazil, because if the issue is not regulated, then the judiciary is going to be provoked to make decisions on problems related to AI. And the Brazilian judiciary has several problems. It takes a lot of time, and there is conflicting decisions before we reach a conclusion that will be clear and uniform and valid for the whole industry. So I think that these are the three factors that make regulation of AI quite important here in Brazil.
Thank you for that. Kashyap, as you look from the vantage point of Asia, who do you think's doing it the best in the best way? I know Asia writ large. It's a big place. It's a huge space, and there's a big difference between what say Japan and what Singapore and what India is doing. Can you talk in broad brushstrokes first, and then we'll come back and look at individuals as well? Is there a way to say that Asia is doing it one specific way, or is really just a broad panoply of methodologies to regulate AI?
No, it's very varied. Asia has, say, 48 countries, but if you look at like which countries stand out, say China is doing certain specific things, India is following a particular approach, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, all are marching to their own drummers, and countries in the Middle East, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel. Each of them has like certain specific elements that stand out. But I mean, if we have time, we can go into the details, in the nitty-gritty of what each is doing. But say China, for example. So 2-3 things that I'd like to call out. So China has been like, it has moved faster than most jurisdictions in moving from soft principles to enforceable law. They already had like a lot of regulation on what to do with the traditional machine learning systems. But when generative AI burst forth, they started making rules in 2023. So 2023 onwards, there have been like a slew of regulations and rules. And it's in fact one of the few countries where the LLM providers or the foundational model providers have to take prior approval before releasing a model. So that's the Chinese approach to the big tech, sort of percolating into their approach to AI. When it comes to India, where I'm personally based, we do not have a specific legislation that is very AI specific, but we have a new broader umbrella Digital Protection Act, which mirrors the Europe's GDPR to an extent. That serves as the anchor legislation. So Japan, like Switzerland, I think is innovation first with soft guardrails. South Korea, again, taking some inspiration from the EU. It's got like risk tiers, and a soft basic comprehensive act has been enacted in 2025. Singapore is interesting because Singapore sort of has had an early start and wants to be the place for AI governance, best practice AI governance. They want to export their model of AI governance to the rest of the regions. The UAE leads with heavy investments and active soft law plus some reputational red lines. Saudi Arabia has like a privacy AI act, which serves as the a Privacy Act which serves as the backbone or the fulcrum for their AI regulation itself. And Israel doesn't have a very specific or a comprehensive AI law, but they're taking an incrementalist approach. Privacy first, trying to do privacy, but also doing innovation. So that's a very quick survey of what's happening in Asia.
Thanks so much. Christian Kunz, same question about Switzerland, as you say, is super, free market, liberalized. EU, if I may say so, a bit nanny state. I hate to, sound like Vice President Vance, J.D. Vance, when he was castigating Europe back in February, saying, hey, you're going to regulate yourself out of existence. He actually might be right. Can you give us a kind of a broad swath of what's out there and everything in between?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start with the EU and the UI Act. So essentially, they try to establish the harmonized legal framework across all EU member states. It does not only apply to US-based actors, but also to non-EU providers whose AI systems are placed on the EU market. So we call this like extraterritorial effect of that legislative act. It's actually the same as they already did with the GDPR. It's similar in reach to the GDPR. The UI Act takes a risk-based approach. We have 4 different risk categories. First one being unacceptable risks. So no one is really doing that in the European Union. It's like social scoring, real-time biometric surveillance in public, stuff like that, entirely prohibited, already applicable now. Then we have high-risk systems, like where they have strict obligations. For example, critical infrastructure, credit scoring, healthcare, stuff like that. Those are the ones who are in focus of the regulation of the AI Act. I will just give you a bit of an overview on the key obligations for those high-risk AI systems. So before market release, they need to conduct the so-called fundamental rights impact assessment. So people who are familiar with data protection law, this is pretty much the same as the data protection impact assessments, the DPIAs, which need to be conducted. You need to see where the risks are, how you can mitigate them, and trying to mitigate the involved risks. Then you need to have strong risk management and data governance frameworks in place. You need to ensure human oversight, explainability requirements, and you need to go through technical conformity assessments, get like the CE marking stamps. You need to publicly register AI, high-risk AI systems. So you see like the main focus of that act is on high-risk AI. Then we have systems with limited risks, like chatbots, deepfakes. There it's all about telling the people that they interact with a machine and not with a human being. So it's essentially around transparency obligations for AI system providers, like of these limited risk. And then we have minimal risk, essentially spam filters. They are encouraged to follow voluntary codes, but no real obligations on them. Enforcement in the EU is expected to be strong, as we already see in the GDPR. And companies may face high fines up to 35 million euros or 7% of the global turnover. That might be a lot, right? And you see coordinated enforcement via the EU AI office and national supervisory bodies in all member states. So implications for practice may be high, like high compliance standards, high compliance costs, potential slowdowns in product development. But clear rules, right? So we have trust, customer trust.
Porque quem tá gravando é o Zé. Eu tô aqui.
Sorry, could we ask, please?
Yes, somebody's with the microphone.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. If you have any questions, please raise them. No problem at all. Entirely the opposite way Switzerland is doing. So Switzerland has no equivalent to the EA Act. Nothing. Switzerland pursues a sectoral targeted model, focusing on innovation and flexibility. It's anchored on the Council of Europe's Framework Convention on AI. This has now been ratified. So Switzerland has established a strategy on AI in February this year, and later on this year already ratified this Council of Europe's Framework Convention on AI. The idea is really to have targeted legal adjustments where it's required, transparency, risk, impact assessments, for example. In particular, sector-specific rules only where strictly required overarching cross-sectoral rules, like in data protection, for example. And Switzerland wants to encourage people to take on non-binding measures, self-declarations, industry-led solutions, goes into that direction. Now the council in Switzerland, Federal Council in Switzerland, has been mandated to to prepare a proposal on how to exactly incorporate the Framework Convention into Swiss law. So this convention needs to be brought into the national law in Switzerland. That's what is currently expected still by the end of 2026. So you could also say, like, for the next 15 months, nothing will really happen. And then it remains to be seen what we will do once we see, like, this proposal on how this legislation shall be incorporated in Switzerland. So definitely a lighter touch approach here in Switzerland and in the EU.
Thank you for that. And we'll come back. I hope the next question I want to ask is, just to give everyone a chance to think about it, is what is this similar? Are the rules about AI as they're being developed, are they going to hurt corporate competitiveness? Are they going to create new forms of compliance that become so onerous that it maybe behooves some companies not to actually work in the EU, as an example? We'll come to that in a sec. Juliano Maranhão, could you talk a little bit about the wide swath of what is Latin America and the different approaches, and maybe land on Brazil and what you're doing specifically, please?
Sorry, what do you mean by
a wide survey? Yeah, what's Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, those sort of what's happening on AI regulation in the area.
You mean in Latin America in general? Yeah,
exactly. Well, and then specific to Brazil.
Yeah, there has been some initiatives of regulation. There is an act that regulates AI in Peru, but it's quite general, only with general principles. But then you have in Chile and Argentina proposed legislation, which is quite influenced by the AI Act with this risk approach and with a central authority. And even in Chile, obligation for registration of previous registration of systems, which I'm not sure in the evolution of this legislation and this debate, because it's still under discussion and revision, as it is in Brazil. But these initiatives, they are still quite inspired and influenced by the AI Act, the European AI Act, where you have two main characteristics. It's a transversal regulation with a risk-based approach, where you have obligations for risk management for developers and deployers of AI. Yeah, and also based on external regulation by the state. And in Brazil, we have begun with something quite similar to the European AI Act, so external regulation with transversal obligations based on the risk approach. But then there was a turn in an important shift in two respects. First, I would say three respects. First, there was a shift from a central and transversal imposition of obligations to a sectorial one. Because now in the law, the obligations for governance, they are more general and limited. And then the regulatory agencies and specific public organs, they are empowered to specify what are the governance obligations, how to specify all those risk management that are listed in the general law. So it went. It's an important shift to a sectoral approach. And in the other respect, two chapters were included. One on self-regulation, and another about certification programs. And this makes a balance between the idea of external regulation to internal regulation. So we adopted actually a midterm between a transversal approach and a sectorial approach, because there are rules that are transversal, but then the sectorial agents must specify how these obligations are going to be implemented in each domain of application. Then regarding external regulation and self-regulation, internal regulation, it's also a midterm because there are these obligations, but sectorial associations may bring codes of conduct that may be validated by the sectorial regulatory agencies. And the same sectorial regulatory agencies may accredit certification entities that come from the private sector to confer certification quality stamps in terms of responsibility for the developers and deployers of AI. So these were the main shifts in the Brazilian regulation. I would bring a third one, which is the chapter on investments, and actually it's a chapter on sustainable development in investments on the AI that brings some mechanisms to further and to foment the development of AI in Brazil. But there are also some rules which are not mandatory, but they are recommending some measures for environmental sustainability. And this is something that I'm not, I haven't seen in different approaches in different countries. And it was an important part of our regulation because the Brazilian government has a plan to an official plan that was actually there was a legislation recently approved to provide financial and tax incentives for the development of data centers in Brazil that are sustainable, only based on green energy and low water consumption. So this connects with the new version of the law that brings incentives for Brazil to be to have an important position as a supplier of energy in the AI production chain.
That's a really interesting point, and I want to come back to that because we don't think about all the cooling that's necessary and the energy that is consumed when we think about AI and the comparisons between the different kinds of regulation. Regulation's either about facial recognition and all the racial bias that goes into that, or it's about in the area of copyright, whether machines can actually file or be part owners of patents or copyrights. We think about AI in the creative process, chatbots and liability. We don't think about the environment and the regulatory, nor do we think about the labor issues that are going to be coming upon us according to Goldman Sachs in March of 2023, they wrote a report saying there's going to be 300 million knowledge-based jobs that would be lost. Now, some of that's been walked back, but we are seeing, nobody wants to be digital roadkill in this. So we're not seeing a kind of a wide legislative enactment that encompasses a variety of disciplines and arenas. We see it about, okay, let's deal with it for criminality. Let's deal with it with cybersecurity. Let's deal with it for criminal justice and sentencing or judicial case management. We don't, and so Kashyap, this all requires institutional capacity, that our judges have a sense of how to use this technology better, that our legislators, our elected officials, can actually understand what's going on in the space to effectively legislate the fastest moving technology in the world. And as we talk about our profession, the legal profession being the second oldest, but the slowest profession in the world, how do we match that? What institutional things do you think it can be done? And maybe you could talk a little bit about what Singapore is doing with its over 40 scholarships to teach old dogs new tricks. Now, those are my words. But please, if you could speak to some of the institutional human capacity building challenges across the region and how different parts of Asia are responding to it.
Right. I think I briefly alluded to smart regulation. By that, what we mean is that it's horses for courses. Everybody acknowledges that AI has potential, potential for innovation, potential for adding to the economy, etc. But at the same time, we also understand that there are consequences of such powerful technology being so widespread. So that's well trodden territory by now. So let me stick to that example that you mentioned. So Goldman Sachs had this report in March of 2023, where they analyzed, instead of the more than 1 billion knowledge workers that are out there in the world, a quarter of them, which they put it at $300 million, their jobs are going to be significantly impacted by these newer AI technologies that we have. That same report also mentioned that AI technologies over a decade could add anywhere upwards of 7% to global GDP. So we're talking about anywhere between $7 to $15 trillion, depending on different estimates, being added to global GDP. But where is that going to come from? Where is this trillions of dollars of value add going to come from? It is going to come from, unfortunately, processes being more efficient, processes being more, lean. And all of that will mean some kind of a reduction of headcount. So when we present this argument of AI causing disruptions, the usual response is look at what happened with the previous industrial revolution, or when we transitioned from the horse-drawn carriages to the automobiles. So we made out okay is the general sense, but there is this huge transition risk that we are missing. Because we did okay, but this transition played out, maybe we did not do okay. This transition played out over a couple of generations. In the case of Industrial Revolution, that took a century. In the case of the other technologies, that took maybe 50 to 60 years. And that is a luxury that we don't have. This transition is playing out so much more faster. Careers are impacted. There is already research which shows that careers are getting impacted at the entry level. There's a Stanford study that came out last month, which said that they found, I think, if I remember correctly, a 13% reduction in the entry-level jobs, recruitment for entry-level hires in the US. Similarly, you also see a lot of experienced folks, like the Walmart CEO has been on record recently. He said that we are going to go, our company is going to increase its revenues over the next 3 years, but our headcount is decoupled from that growth. We are going to stay flat. So these kind of effects are already playing out. And as you mentioned, a big ask of our social systems. So we are actually not thinking of the disruption that this transition risk poses, because a lot of our social security systems are tied to employment taxes. If net employment is going to reduce, even by a few basis points, any welfare programs that are linked to having a certain number of employees, assumptions, that's going to be, that's going to cause a lot of problems. So in all of these things, a big thing that stands out is skilling. How do employees, irrespective, I'm not talking just about the legal sector employees or the regulators, but how do employees across industries upskill and reskill themselves? And for that, you need, money. The onus previously in previous generations, maybe a few decades ago, it used to be that the employers took that onus of training the workforce. But now we've shifted to a model where the onus is expected. People are like, okay, you go to Coursera, learn these courses, pick up these skills, or do the certifications on your own, and be ready to perform on the job, or take a pay cut, or be at risk of being moved out. So what Singapore has done, what you mentioned, is that they said anybody above a particular age, I think it's 40, we are going to give you certain amount of scholarship money to go get trained yourself in AI. Singapore is a relatively small country, and a relatively small and wealthy country. Probably they can do it. The Scandinavian countries can do it. Switzerland can do it, perhaps. But for larger countries, that's going to be a problem to be able to offer these kind of scholarships. But at the same time, and this is something that we cannot avoid. If I come back to the legal sector itself, there is a huge onus on law schools to prepare for this coming new world where the practice of law and the provision of legal services is going to be done through technology assisted. I'm not just saying AI, but technology assisted manner. So in our law schools, are we preparing the lawyers for that? Is our curriculum updated? Is the curriculum geared to what the future legal sectors are going to look like a decade now? Or are we still teaching the case method from 1850, I think? So these are some challenges. And frankly, I mean, all of us have questions and we're grappling with the different parts of the puzzle rather than have specific answers. But I do have one specific answer, which is read our books on AI for lawyers and the upcoming AI governance and regulation.
Yes, we'll put a link in the chat in the ever-present self-promotion experience. Christian, how about from your perspective? Are we getting that kind of institutional capacity building at a federal level in Switzerland, and also what is the EU doing in terms of trying to institutionalize capacity building to meet the challenges in the ever-present nanny state that is the EU has become?
Well, the short answer to that is Switzerland is doing nothing currently. So essentially, on a political level, doing nothing, waiting until the end of 2026, until we have the proposal, and then we will see how it goes and who will have political responsibility then in Switzerland. If you look at the private market, I feel businesses in Switzerland are really starting to be afraid of the whole AI wave. Also, when I take our law firm, it's one of the bigger law firms in Switzerland. We have 300 lawyers here, 50 partners in the firm, really having strategic discussions on where we're heading to now, how the market will look like 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, where we currently have, let's say 70% of the whole revenues of the firm is with merchant acquisitions. On one hand, investigations on the other hand, so where you process high amounts, large volume of data. So that's where AI will certainly kick in. When I tell my partners here that this law firm will be significantly reduced by numbers of people in a few years, revenues might also come down, that's shocking, right? That's discussions we're currently having. From a political side of things, there is nothing going on. Wait to be seen what's going on with the proposal. It's, from my perspective, a little bit different in the European Union, but the focus in the European Union is on enforcement, is on oversight bodies. It's on European AI Office, which has become operational in August this year, just a few weeks ago. It's coordinating implementation, right? It's especially around general purpose AI. So the EU is not really helping the businesses by these kind of initiatives, but rather trying to supervise them, to see where they do something wrong, where something might run against the EU AI Act. So maybe starting enforcement actions. It's not about giving people and businesses a helping hand in overcoming these kind of upcoming challenges. And that's remarkable, I feel, looking at this overall regulations, putting pressure on people, on businesses, making them harder life, at the same time not being here for them, giving them a helping hand, trying to anticipate what's going on, also helping the EU market at the end of the day.
Interesting. So really it's about playing gotcha in the EU, so where you're going wrong, not empowering people of how to best practice, how to do things right. If that's a kind of a shorthand way of saying it. Really interesting because, the opposite end of that, if it's only one linear spectrum, is what the US is doing or not doing in the sense of complete free market. A lot of people remember back and when we last saw each other, Christian and Juliano in San Diego in May, the big beautiful bill was still a bill, and part of that was okay. Sorry, someone's microphone's still on. If you would be kind of pleased to turn that off, folks. I think someone's microphone is still on. Thanks. What that big beautiful bill said, and it did pass in the House of Representatives, but luckily didn't get through the Senate, was not only not to propose a federal law for AI, but to actually put a 10-year moratorium on enforcing. You can promulgate all you want. You can pass as many laws as you want to all 50 states, but there are 30 states have laws dealing with facial recognition or likeness, like the Elvis Act in Tennessee and so forth, facial recognition in Virginia. Use of facial recognition in criminal justice matters is illegal in some cities like Oakland and San Francisco. Not a surprise. It was going to put a ban on the actual enforcement of those laws for 10 years. And so it's almost a kind of a dog in the manger feel of like, not only are we not going to do it, you all can't do it either, as we, push down so much for states' rights. Point being, the opposite end of this, what I call a nanny superstate of the EU, and as you were confirming, Christian, that it's all about what you can't do, was anything goes. But in fairness, the AI, America's AI National Plan, which came out, or action plan, it's called the America's AI Plan, on July 23rd of this year from the White House, was all about institution building and incentivizing the race so that the United States can win, but understanding the role that the private sector plays. And it's really like, it's like a faculty meeting, a plan to have a plan, to have another plan, and to keep talking. But it's also a roadmap of what the role the private sector will play and how government shouldn't be interfering with that. It's a very free market document. And sort of the opposite of what the Europeans are doing, and in a way the opposite, if there be polar opposites, of what the Chinese have been doing in terms of a market authoritarian, much more heavy-handed in its regulatory approach, so that the Chinese Communist Party has complete control over social harmony and so forth. Now, having said that, the Chinese have developed really great rules to protect children in the Beijing Consensus. So there are good parts to that. What I want to turn to now, Juliano, is if you could kind of explain whether Brazil is doing anything in terms of state intervention to promote or even reducing barriers so that the private market, the private firms out there can do more and give Brazil that helping hand to be a leader, not just in the region, but globally, and anywhere else in Latin America that might be doing a state interventionist model of providing for human capacity building.
Yeah, actually, in this, AI has become a key factor for the development of economy. And so it's clear for the Brazilian policy and the Brazilian regulation that Brazil must find its way within the chain of production. And the first big bet, and it's clear for Brazil, is that we may be key suppliers of energy worldwide, because 70% of our energy matrix is green, is sustainable and renewable. And so we would like to attract investments on data centers. And therefore, there's this new regulation already that was approved to reduce taxes and to facilitate the building of AI data centers, and also the regulation and the regulation emphasizes this quality of being green data centers. So we would like, and of course, this will bring opportunities for digital companies and companies that are well developed on the field of AI, to bring these data centers here, and maybe become we have incentives for transfers of technology. And that's the bet, because of course we are behind in the field of the development of the AI systems, or even in deployment. We know that. So our first bet is we may be key players in the supply of green energy. So this is one. The other thing that, of course, each country has its particularities. So the laissez-faire environment itself is not enough. In Brazil, of course, there must be freedom of entrepreneurship, but there is something that we call the Brazilian cost, which are some bureaucracies and taxes that make it difficult for entrepreneurship here in Brazil. So in the field of innovation, we have to build some bridges with public investment or relaxing some bureaucracies, reducing taxes to bring incentives to attract capital and attract innovation. We have made it recently very successfully, this regarding startups. So Brazil, mainly São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, became an important hub in Latin America for startups, and we are creating unicorns that are becoming key players in Latin America with relating to digital services. And these companies, they are incorporating AI. So what the idea in this aspect of investment that is now under discussion in the legislation in the House of Deputies is we are going to promote at Logarithm a big an important meeting. It will be in 2 weeks, gathering the deputies who are involved in the AI regulation, the Minister of Finance, and the Ministry of Science and Technology, who is in charge of the Brazilian plan for infrastructure for AI, to debate the content of the legislation, to find opportunities for incentives for AI. We are making this effort right now. And the idea is this, that the main strategy is this: we have the vocation to be suppliers of energy. This may bring opportunities for counterparts and transfer of technology, and we must bring incentives for startups and companies that are already Brazilian companies that already has a role and are leaders in the Latin America digital environment, to become players in the AI market.
And that kind of, when you talk about the energy piece to it, which is so important, and the clean water piece to it also, for the cooling of all the machines that are doing all the crunching of information, critical. But as you're saying this, I'm thinking, oh God, more extractive industries and more primary industries. The key will be for Brazil to get to the secondary and tertiary models, where which you have been such a leader on the internet and in social media and development of apps and so forth, to make sure that you're just not clean energy producers or any energy producers. Yeah. But to not continue that history of exploitive industries where everything's from the satellite to the metropolis. I hate to sound like Fernando Henrique Cardozo, but that idea of dependency theory we want to move away from, obviously to ensure, and that leads to the issue of tech nationalism.
Yeah, actually, the idea is this: just to use green energy as a bridge for Brazil to take pace with the leaders and the international leaders in this technology worldwide.
Yeah, to leverage it, in essence.
To leverage it, exactly.
Yeah, so that you're not just providing a cheap energy or inexpensive water and having to import the tech, but actually produce the tech itself, because there's a far bigger, greater gross margin and profits that come with developing the technology and the licensing revenue streams, royalties, and so forth that come from that, versus here's some cheap energy. But that leads to tech nationalism, which is, as a huge country, Brazil, as an even huger country, India, your data your citizens' data is a gold mine, literally and figuratively. What, Kashyap, from an Indian perspective, are you doing that? And you've had traditionally protectionist markets, as has Brazil over the years, and I mean Switzerland too. You've got nationalist markets when it comes to issues of finance and some of your strategic industries. What, Kashyap, is going on in Asia with tech nationalism and data localization rules, broadly, and then specific to India, please?
Yeah. Before I get to that, I think what I was really happy to hear, the opportunity that Brazil is looking to capitalize on green energy. And more broadly, I think that this huge demand for energy driven by AI is actually going to lead to a lot of innovation in energy technologies itself. So it's going to be a big positive for the energy sector itself. We're already seeing some of that in the US as well. So coming back to the question of data sovereignty. So this, even prior to AI, with the rise of the cloud hyperscalers, this has been an issue. And a lot of that is driven not just from the motive of protecting your own citizens' privacy, data privacy, and data security, but also by the fact that a lot of cross-border, governments in general have become wary of their country's data being subject to the control of other countries' jurisdictions. So it's very easy for, say, a Western tech company to provide the data about, say, a country's citizens to its legal enforcement things. We see that playing out in the case of TikTok, for example. There's this geopolitical race between China and US has been playing out in TikTok. So that's, I think, a legit concern for different countries, and the reason leading to this questions about data localization requirements and whatnot. We're also seeing certain innovations. So, for example, if you want to set up a data center in the Middle East, and similar to Brazil, I think they're also hoping to capitalize on this huge request for that. But can you serve a European or a Western client or an Asian client out of the Middle East, which has a different data sort of protection regime? So there are these innovations such as data corridors and data embassies, which say that yes, a data center may be physically resident in another different country, but is subject to the laws of the sending country. So we're seeing certain that kind of innovation to enable the spread of AI data centers to countries with lower or greener energy cost resources. So that's some of the regulatory instruments, regulatory innovation, not just technological innovation, but regulatory innovation that we're seeing when it comes to AI. But more broadly, what we are seeing, if you've been following the news, very quickly, I know we're almost sort of getting to the close of the time. So we've been seeing that US has been imposing restrictions on the export of chips, high-end chips to China. But more recently, in the last couple of weeks, China itself has asked its domestic companies not to buy NVIDIA chips. So this sort of signals the bifurcation or the trifurcation of the global AI ecosystem into 2 or 3 camps, one led by the US, one led by China, and perhaps one led by the EU. So this is a signal. So we're going to have a whole stack of ecosystem centered around one country or one region. So there's going to be a self-contained set of chips, applications, and foundation models, et cetera, et cetera. So we're in for very interesting times.
Indeed, and I'm hoping to get your permission collectively, Kashyap. I know it's late, but if we could just go over our hour for a couple of minutes, if everyone's okay with that. I understand if you have to drop off, so I'll thank everyone now for joining us. But if we can keep going, for those of you who can stay, that would be great. Christian, from your perspective, data localization rules are, I guess, really important for, not for Switzerland, but per se, but for the EU. Can you speak a little bit about data sovereignty and the tech nationalism that we're seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. Super. Yeah, in Switzerland, actually, we have no general data localization requirements at all. We see some sector-specific rules. For example, in the banking and finance sector, where the Swiss financial market regulator expects banks to keep certain records accessible in Switzerland, but it does not apply to all data. So also when we advise Swiss banks on cloud outsourcings, they can essentially store data wherever they want, as long as we have the required contractual safeguards in place to keep data safe outside of Switzerland. We see some cantonal laws in Switzerland, not federal laws, but cantonal laws, which require some health institutions in the healthcare sector also having certain records accessible in Switzerland. But there is no general federal data localization requirement. What we have is, however, quite strict rules on data transfers. So Switzerland, same as the European Union, takes the liberty of determining what countries and organizations in the world have a so-called adequate data protection level. As long as a country, essentially all European countries, including Switzerland, UK, Japan, and others, provide for so-called adequate data protection level, so we can simply transfer out data to those countries, to servers, stores data there. So that's not a problem at all. And then, however, when we have certain countries where Switzerland, Europe feels they don't provide an adequate data protection level. And that's where we need to put in place like contractual safeguards, maybe technical measures on top of that to make these data transfers compliant. So essentially, we don't require organizations to keep data in Switzerland, but we put some burden on them if they want to transfer data outside of Switzerland to certain jurisdictions. Predominantly US is one of those jurisdictions where the EU market, Switzerland, feels they don't provide for adequate data protection. So we need to put in place certain contractual safeguards, technical measures, if we want to transfer out data to those countries. I mean, we have a similar approach on data transfers from the European Union. So here in that field, Switzerland is essentially copying what the European Union is doing. So it's not really innovative what Switzerland is doing on data transfers. We have the similar rules in the European Union when it comes to data transfers. We have also no data localization requirements in the EU Act or these newer digital laws we have in Switzerland. We have in the European Union, like the Governance Act or Data Act. They rather promote data sharing across the EU, but include certain restrictions on transfers of non-personal data versus GDPR, which covers personal data. And then we have some laws in the European Union, like the NIS2 directive, cybersecurity directive, which de facto requires EU-based hosting for critical infrastructure. So here you have, it's not really directly in the law, but if you work on that, you need to come to the conclusion that critical infrastructures need to store data also in the European Union.
Thank you for that. Well, I've got a couple more questions. So with your permission, we'll keep going. And because this is a meeting about corporate compliance, about global integrity issues, and the fourth annual meeting of that, I wanted to talk a little bit because each of you have clients in different contexts. Some of them legal clients, some of them technology clients. In terms of Professor Kompella, what are you? And I know I didn't go to Juliano about this particular about the issue of tech nationalism. So. If you could think about everyone, and then Julian will ask you specifically right now about tech nationalism in Brazil and elsewhere in Latin America, but also think about what are your clients asking for? What's the major risk factor that boards of directors are thinking about? But first, Juliano, if you would please, just about a little bit about tech nationalism in Brazil.
Well, there is, you were concerned and discussing about data regulation and access of data. Brazil is a client of the Brussels effect. So we have our version of the data protection regulation. We have the AI Act, which began much like the European AI Act. We have also an initiative in a proposal of regulation that's similar to the European Data Act. And we have also had two regulations that are under discussion in Brazil. One similar to the Digital Services Act, and the other one similar to the Digital Markets Act. So we have all, but what's happening here is that we are now questioning whether these regulations were a good idea. We are following very carefully the new consultation about the DMA in Europe, and we had also experienced a political incident, a diplomatic incident with the Trump administration, which clearly addressed these regulations in Brazil, the Brazilian Digital Service Act and the Brazilian Digital Market Act, where the Trump administration addressed the issue as does Brazil wants to be an enemy of the American companies, and so instituted a strong tariff of 50% on Brazilian exportations. That were, of course, a matter of diplomacy. Several of it was revised. So we are quite reflective on whether following European regulations would be a good idea geopolitically and for the Brazilian economy. And so the discussion about the Data Act now is going in a much slower pace. Also, the Regulation on Digital Markets Act is a slower pace and is still debated. The AI regulation is more advanced, and it's expected to be approved by the end of this year or by the beginning of next year. But we are quite concerned and have a much more clear vision on what would mean the Brazilian digital sovereignty. So what is exactly our strategy in the digital realm? How can we take pace with international leaders in digital services and also in AI products? So we are now much more aware and careful on this debate. So initially, we actually copycat. We were copycat of Europe, but now the directions are different. So the shifts that I have told here in the AI regulation is already a reflex of these new considerations of what is exactly the Brazilian strategy on the whole market. International market.
Thank you for that. Now, going now back to the issue of your clients, and without naming them, of course, but some of the corporate concerns of the boards of directors of different corporations that you might be advising in this shifting landscape of AI and the geopolitics. Dovetailing with what Juliano was just talking about. Christian, maybe we'll start with you. What are you seeing your clients worried about the most, and is corporate social responsibility and some of the issues regarding brand equity in the face of this very intrusive technology, is that one of them?
Well, to be honest, I mean, that's not really the priority they have. I mean, social responsibility is something they consider, but it's really not on the top of the list. I mean, just thinking about recent matters, I mean, it's like they're all around by all of that digital acts coming out, data protection, AI Act, NIS2 directive, Data Act, Data Governance Act, GDPR enforcement. So it's really a lot coming, and they are simply all around. I'm working 16 hours a day on these topics, and I still don't feel I really understand every detail. And these people, board members of my clients, they have other topics on mind as well. So I need to try to give them like the key messages out of these acts, the key obligations they have. And it's rather easy to go by each act. But if you try to combine that and to give them an integrated governance framework for the company, that's where it's getting really, really difficult also for them. So that's the first topic. The second one is cybersecurity resilience. It's on threat. I mean, we have a lot of supply chain attacks, ransomware attacks in Switzerland, Europe. Operational continuity is at stake. They see their competitors dying due to ransomware attacks. So here they are really worried. And when I look at the risk parameters, I always see like cybersecurity risks being among the top 3 risks which are identified. If you go through PwC or Accenture reports for the last years, you always see cybersecurity on top of that. So we are helping them in preparing them for the attacks. So putting in place instant response plans, going through tabletop exercises, simulating cases with them. And that's super interesting because you really see old white men sitting on board of these institutions. They have gone through everything, and that's exactly an absolutely new risk factor they have not been used to if they need to deal with threat actors. So that's the second topic. And the third one is really around getting an idea on what all of these legislation will lead to and how the company they are sitting on the board of will look like in 10 years from now. And that's something which is super strategic decisions they need to take now, and they will then take years to really come to ground, to have an effect. And they're really struggling in finding out where shall we head to. Shall we make further investments in people in the firm? Do we still need them? I mean, shall we go into an entirely other direction? Is our company still needed in 10 years from now? And I mean, there was a time, when we still had candles. And if I was sitting on a board of a candle producer and then the light bulbs came, I mean, the honest answer is the company is not needed to that extent anymore. So these, let's say, as very, very basic issues they have around the future of the company, strategic decisions, that's a third topic I often see.
Thank you for that. I love that analogy of candle companies. Juliano, what are you seeing in terms of taking off your law professor hat and putting on your corporate counsel hat? What are you seeing corporations and your clients interested in terms of preparing for this new AI brave new world?
Okay, in the field of law services, what we can observe is that actually firms are not dedicating significant budget for AI compliance because we don't have a law in force here. So that makes a big difference. Actually, we see, for instance, demand by hospitals because they are using AI and they are concerned with the effects and how they should deploy these systems, and some tech companies. International tech companies, they usually are also already hiring US offices, law firms, or European ones to make the compliance with the main guidelines of European AI Act. And when it comes here to Brazil, it's only to adapt international frameworks. So this is the demand specifically on compliance to AI Act regulation. But on the other hand, regarding what happened in the GDPR, some Brazilian companies already started to make the compliance procedures regarding the GDPR, the European one, because there was an expectation that it would come to Brazil, and also that law firms, actually to firms who had relation to Europe, they should be compliant. So this law firms market in the data protection were already active in regarding data protection before the enactment of the Brazilian law. This is not happening now with AI. I think that firms are more cautious, and I have an hypothesis for this. There was a lot of investments by companies hiring law offices, law firms to make all the compliance procedures and documentation. But in fact, the Data Protection Authority in Brazil is not equipped enough for fiscalization and investigation. So it was created in 2018. We are already in 2025, and only one company was fined. There are only a few investigations, so the authority has shown no teeth. And then now companies are not that concerned regarding AI. And this, I think, was an important aspect of the shift from a central authority to regulatory agencies, because actually Brazil administration, public administration, wouldn't have the budget to structure an authority as strong as in Europe to be the central authority. It could happen as it happened with the Data Protection Authority. For you to have an idea, the sum of the budget of the Data Protection Authority and the AI Authority in Europe is around 80 million euros a year, and the budget we have for the Brazilian Data Protection Authority is 3 million euros. So this may explain also why in the Brazilian legislation there was a shift for sectorial authorities, because they are already installed, they have their own budget and may immediately start enforcement. And the other, it also explains why the law shifted to rely more in self-regulation and certification programs, because it relieves the burden on the state to regulate and also to make the enforcement. So these are moves that are congenial to the Brazilian context.
Absolutely. But I mean, this is not the first time for any country to have really developed laws for those that are enforced and not have the institutions to actually enforce those laws, making the entire legal system somewhat questionable in terms of efficacy.
The Brazilian market, the Brazilian market for law firms in data protection was quite high before the enactment. After the enactment, there is no authority, and then the market is actually in a crisis for law firms here in Brazil.
Interesting. And again, that totally explains the move towards sectoral. So because you've got regulatory agencies already funded and they just have to add on another area of enforcement into their jurisdiction. And it'll be interesting to see as the European Union AI Act continues its extraterritorial push. And 7% of your annual turnover, as Christian explained, or your annual sales, is a lot when you're a Google or a Meta or an Alphabet, or a Microsoft. And it's always interesting to see the Europeans becoming more extraterritorial, taking a page out of the American playbook. Kashyap, what about you? What are you seeing your clients worried about as you do your corporate trainings?
So I think when it comes to the private sector, some of their concerns broadly mirror what Christian has outlined. How do they strengthen their cybersecurity postures, particularly in light of new risks, new surface, new threat vectors that AI poses? The additional dimension that I see is about talent readiness for these future business models that may be emerging. But what's interesting is from a public sector point of view, I see across Asia, from the government, everybody wants to have like a sovereign AI strategy in place. So they know that this is a long-term game. They may not be able to match right now the state-of-the-art AI models that are available from the frontier labs in the West or in China. But they are willing to put in that investments right now, because that realization is slowly dawning that this is not just an economic technology, but this is also a culture, and this is a linguistic technology. And so to preserve some of these elements, some kind of a sovereign LLM strategy, sovereign AI strategy. For some countries, it includes chips as well, access to chips. But for some others, it's just at the application layer. So that's a new shift that we have seen since the beginning of this year.
And for the law students here, LLM there stands for large language model, not Masters of Law degree. But thank you, Professor Kompella. I got two more questions, and then we can wind this thing up. And Christian, you mentioned the SROs, the idea of these self-regulating organizations, which speaks to, you avoid the whole problem of having to regulate at the state level. If you've got self-regulating organizations, and it avoids the whole problem of regulatory capture because there's no regulatory part to it, except for the self part. Can you trust these big tech and other corporations to, and maybe not can you trust, can one trust or one ensure that there's not self-dealing going on when, again, there's not the kind of enforcement, the SRO told us that we violated this, and then what? They're going to kick us out of the SRO, so we'll have to pay less dues. What's the output here and the eventual change in behavior, if any?
Well, I based on my experience also from other sectors where we have this self-regulation, I wouldn't expect too much from that at the end of the day. You also already see some tendencies now. Maybe you've heard that the EU has issued a code of practice for general purpose AI, and Google they announced they will sign it, but Meta already apparently said they will not sign it at all. So you see here this kind of self-regulation might at the end of the day not really work out. It's often used also in Switzerland as well, that a lot of people come together, sit to take around the table, they try to agree on something, and then some do it, others don't do it. And if there is no real pressure on companies from the political side of things on doing something, or if they really see great losses which will come if they don't do anything, they will simply, discuss, maybe agree on something, and then at the end of the day, it's not really going a lot. So I personally would not expect too much from that. Maybe the world is completely different here than what I've seen in other sectors when it comes to self-regulation. But I wouldn't expect too much from that.
Yeah, these are for-profit corporations whose only interest is to increase the value of the shareholders' wealth. That's the purpose of the corporation, notwithstanding what the Business Roundtable might promulgate every now and then in terms of stakeholders and local people and their environments. Kashyap, from your perspective, do you think SROs are effective, and particularly in a place like in Asia? I know, again, wide area, but what are you seeing in India with SROs and elsewhere?
I think in general, we all know that regulation lags technology innovation. But in this field of AI, particularly foundational AI or general purpose AI, the capability exists only in a few frontier labs. So it's a particularly difficult area for regulators to sort of keep tabs on, to govern effectively. So because of that, the SROs may have a certain shelf life till regulators catch up, till that knowledge is so much more widely diffused. Let me give you an instance. For example, I'm based in Bangalore, which is like the tech hub of India. So if a technology company is opening their office, they usually open their office first in Bangalore. But OpenAI started their India office, and they did that in Delhi. Their OpenAI's first India office is in Delhi, to be close to the government and to the regulator. So you see all kinds of make nice with the regulator, and the regulators also need this because OpenAI brings that knowledge which is not so widely diffused at this point in time. So yeah, SROs are sort of self-defeating in some sense in pure industries, in equilibrium conditions, but at this point in time, I think we're likely to see this. So for example, in Japan seems to be going down this path of saying corporate self-regulation under government guidance. So that helps us maintain innovation leadership while also achieving certain level of compliance. So it's quite interesting space.
That's a cultural thing too, because that might work in Japan because there's still honor and shame very much running through the culture, and corporate leaders are held to a higher account, and there's in other jurisdictions, shaming comes number 2 after for profit. So I hate to sound so cynical. So if we now get rid of SROs as an option, thinking, following what you're all saying. Juliano, are the self-regulating or organizations in Brazil of importance?
In different fields, there are successful examples. There are some examples that did not work. Actually, there are examples of scandals where companies that were certified were told, for instance, some environmental accidents. But you may have, for instance, the health sector in Brazil is fully self-regulated by association of hospitals and associations of physicians. So there are examples of where self-regulation is successful, and certification programs have indeed enforced and created sectorial rules that helped to further the sector. So the health sector is an example. The example, for instance, in marketing and publicity agencies is also self-regulated. And there are other fields. There is also certification, environmental certification. There are some scandals, but in general, it works. So we have already this experience, but it must come with an acknowledgement or validation by the government, by the state.
So still some oversight. So you've got SROs,
yeah.
And what I'm hearing from all of you is the sovereign state is still a player in all of this. They just got to get their people.
Yeah, because it brings legitimacy in terms of it's not only the commercial interests of the private sector that are taken into account, but also public interests.
Yeah. So
regardless of how effective is this monitoring, but just making the stamp official, it's a big incentive for the self-regulatory scheme.
Absolutely, like judicial review is in that other branch of government. But then this is the last question, gang. If we've covered SROs, we're saying, okay, the sovereign state still needs to get skilled up, and regulators need to know as much, if not more, than the tech companies themselves, as if that's ever going to happen. There's another bucket of potential regulation and harmonization, and that's the international level. So I want to ask each of you to close this up. Christian, maybe starting with you, given that you're in Switzerland, known for, particularly Geneva, housing, being the headquarters of so many international organizations. Is there any international organization that you would trust to help create rules, and whether it's the World Economic Forum or the UN or whomever, where do you think international regulation can go, or are we? Is this just a fool's errand?
That's a great question, James. We see now in Switzerland, paid attention on the Council of Europe AI Convention, which has been ratified in Switzerland. So maybe that's something which can be leveraged. We'll now see how the Swiss regulator will try to bring that in practice into law. So maybe this will be challenges around that as well. Then we have the OECD principles and G7 commitments, which are also out there. I currently, honestly, don't really see where we are heading to. I currently feel, after debates, I've partially been part thereof as well in Switzerland, that the Council of Europe AI Convention might be something where others will also look into, at least when trying to build their own laws.
So it won't be so much a Brussels effect, but a Council of Europe effect. Okay. Juliano, from your perspective, is there any even regional organization, the OAS, or international organizations that you think would be empowered to take on at least a harmonization or a model law that could be implemented domestically?
Well, the standards that are being used by the industry regarding responsible AI, they are connected and they are mainly the international standards, ISO or the NIST standards. So in this respect, we are following somehow international standards and trying to adapt them to the Brazilian context. So I think that in general, our regulations on AI, they follow the international debate. There is only one point that is divergent and quite concerning, which is the regulation on copyright. The proposal in the Brazilian draft bill as it stands is that for using protected works for input, companies must list protected work, must manage opt-in, opt-out, and must pay based on authorial property or copyrights. And that would make the development of Gen AI in Brazil practically impossible. And even worse, I don't know what's worse, but the problem is there was first the idea that we should develop a Brazilian large language model, Brazilian generative AI that reflects Brazilian culture. But if we have this burden on the development, the cost to develop Gen AI in Brazil would be high. The cost to use Brazilian content would be quite high. So, and actually, there is a lot of Portuguese-speaking countries, and international company doesn't need actually the Brazilian content to develop Gen AI models. So I think that the outcome would be that the Brazilian culture would be out of the development unless Brazilians would be willing to pay much higher licenses, higher cost licenses to have access to an AI system that are more congenial to the Brazilian content. That will not happen because it's not a matter of choice. Brazilians cannot afford that. So this is the most polemic part of our legislation.
And I've noticed no one said the UN yet. Kashyap, as a member of the IEEE, are you gonna fly the flag on that one?
I think my view on this is that a harmonized international regulation for AI, the odds are like very heavily against it. Because AI is not like a nuclear regime problem, like where there are a small set of actors. Instead, it's like a diffuse, fast-moving technology that is embedded in trade, culture, and speech. So enforcement, if you think about it, it requires like harmonized liability and sharing testing protocols, none of which will exist against rival blocks. So what will be branded as international will in practice be like interoperability patches between, like, say, the US, EU, China, maybe Brazil, India, etc. And or probably we'll be aligned with some of these hubs. Because if you think about it, like, I mean, true global convergence or true international interoperable regulation will be like giving up some part of your sovereignty, and because the stakes are so high, none of the countries will be willing to do that. So where do we end up with? I think ultimately we'll have like private assurance ecosystems where maybe some of the standards from IEEE, some of the responsible AI principles that Juliano mentioned, maybe they will become like functional regulators across borders. And governments may either resist them or ratify them, but legitimacy, I think, will flow from adoption by firms, not by treaties.
So we're talking about kind of a regulatory corridor like we saw with some blockchain technologies. Is that a fair analogy?
Oh, I thought blockchain is dead.
Not here, tech bro, not here. Well, I want to take this moment to thank you all. We should do one lightning round just to finish off because we started with a lightning round. And my question is, if you had to pick one way to do it, sectoral, SRO, risk-based, or nothing, free market, which one would you pick? Christian, we'll start with you.
Currently, I would say I would go with the sectoral approach with some tweaks to the laws we currently have without any kind of overarching legislation. So the path Switzerland is taking feels good to me now. However, it remains to be seen how things will turn out by the end of 2026 when we'll see like the concrete measures and legislative changes due to the current adoption of the convention. So it feels good, but remains to be seen when we have maybe another roundtable 2 years from now, I see exactly the opposite.
See you at the 6th annual meeting for sure. Zay, we'll put a pin in that and remind ourselves to come back to those issues. Professor Pontes. Juliano, what say you? Which of those four, assuming a closed universe?
Yeah, I would go for the risk-based approach, but sectoral approach with the evaluation of risks that are domain specific. I think that is the most smart, since the risks are related to applications, and applications are domain specific to particular sectors of economic activity or social activities. It should be that the evaluation of risk should be in the application, focused on the application with the evaluation by sectorial authorities.
Okay, thank you for that. So we have one vote for sectoral, one vote for risk-based with some caveats. Kashyap, what say you?
Sectoral with common sense, but before any regulation, I want to put a test for the legislators and the regulators on demonstrating their AI competence. So once they do that, then they can start regulating.
Good luck with that. Yeah. Well, that not only do they have to know about it, they have to read the bill before they pass it. So some basic reading skills would be good too, in addition to coding and understanding all that goes into these automation tools. I want to thank our panel, Dr. Christian Kunz, Dr. Juliano Maranhão, Professor Kashyap Kompella. Amazing panel. Thank you for putting this together. Kashyap, as the coordinator, any last thoughts?
No, I think I want to thank our hosts. I think this is a great conference, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you all. Thanks to students in international business transactions at Cal Western, to the FACAMPA team, to Professor Zé Pontes. Thank you so much. We'll end the recording here, and we look forward to the remaining panels in this 4th annual Corporate Compliance and Global Integrity Conference. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Guys, can we take a picture before we go?
Excellent. For sure. Will you send it to all of
Only
us?
if you share the
Please
picture
open your
by
camera.
email.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for opening up their... Yeah, please share it by email or even drop it into the chat here in addition, please. That would be great.